Hey everyone, take a quick look around you right now. I bet you can spot a pattern on some kind of fabric. Maybe it's on your t-shirt, the throw pillows on your couch, or even your curtains. It's everywhere. Textile printing is this incredible art form that's so woven into our daily lives we barely even notice it's there. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain and really dig into how it all works. I mean, really, have you ever actually stopped to think about that? How does a plain, solid piece of cloth get turned into this canvas of amazing, detailed designs? Well, it's a way more fascinating process than you might think. And trust me, by the time we're done with this, you'll be able to look at any fabric and pretty much read the story of how it was made. You know, the story of textile printing is a really long one. It stretches back thousands and thousands of years. It kicked off with simple hand-carved tools in places like ancient India, and it's just evolved and evolved into the super sophisticated, high-tech methods we use all over the world today. It's really the perfect marriage of human artistry and incredible technology. So let's dive in and see how it all comes together. So, here's the game plan. We're going to start by looking at the deep roots of this ancient art. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty, exploring the methods, that's the how, and then the styles, the what. After that, I'm going to turn you into a regular print detective so you can spot these things in the wild. And then we'll wrap up by thinking about what it all means. You know, this human need to decorate our fabrics, it's nothing new at all. In fact, records show that we were putting patterns on cloth even before we were doing a lot of weaving or embroidering. We are talking about a craft that is truly, deeply ancient. Let's just do a quick little trip through time here. This is not a recent invention, okay? We've got evidence of printed textiles going all the way back to 2500 BC. And you see these early innovations like clay cylinders in Peru used for borders. But the real game changer? The Industrial Revolution. In 1785, roller printing pops up in England, and for the first time ever, you can mass produce this stuff. Then jump to 1900, and screen printing comes along as a cheaper, more flexible option, bringing us a lot closer to what we use today. It's just a story of constant evolution. All right, let's get into the mechanics of it. The big question here is, how does the color actually physically get onto the fabric? We're going to look at four main ways, from the oldest, most manual method to the most modern and high-tech. And this is where it all started, hand block printing. It's the oldest form, and it's just beautifully simple. You get a block of wood, you carve a design into it, you dip that raised pattern in dye, and then you press it firmly onto the fabric. Every single press is done by a person's hand, which means no two pieces are ever exactly the same. It is the absolute definition of artisanal craftsmanship. And let me tell you, it is so much more than just stamping. Before even one block touches that cloth, the fabric has to be perfectly prepped. It's washed, it's treated with something called a mordant. You can think of that like a primer for paint. It helps the natural dyes really lock in, and then it's stretched super tight. Only then does the careful work of printing start, and often they use a different, perfectly aligned block for every single color. It's an incredibly meticulous process that takes just immense skill and patience. Next up, we have hand screen printing, which really evolves that original idea. So instead of a solid carved block, this method uses a fine mesh screen. A stencil is created on that screen to block out parts of the design, and then ink is pushed through the open areas right onto the fabric below. This lets you create much larger patterns and get way better, richer color saturation than some other techniques. Okay, so this breaks down the different tools for the job really nicely. We've seen hand block and screen printing, which are all about craftsmanship and smaller batches. But if you want true mass production, you need roller printing. Just picture these massive engraved copper cylinders rolling out patterns at mind-boggling speeds. That's how most of the patterned fabric you see in stores is made. And then you have heat transfer, which is a modern marvel. Dyes on a special paper are turned into a gas by heat, and that gas actually infuses right into synthetic fibers. That's how you get those photorealistic, super complex images that would be impossible any other way. And right here, this is the classic trade-off, right? Machine versus hand. Roller printing has a super high setup cost, but it's offset by that lightning-fast production, which is exactly why you can buy a patterned t-shirt for so cheap. Block printing is the total opposite. The equipment cost is low, but it's slow, it's labor-intensive, and it results in these really unique premium pieces where you're really paying for the artist's time and skill. Okay, so we have covered the how, the tools of the trade. Now let's talk about the what. This isn't about the tool itself, but about the strategy of how you apply the color. There are three main styles you gotta know, and once you get them, it's like learning a secret language for understanding printed fabric. First up, we've got the direct print. This is by far the most common and honestly the most intuitive style. You take a white or a light-colored piece of fabric and you print the colored design right on top of it. It's just like taking a pen and drawing on a blank piece of paper. Simple, super effective, and you see it everywhere. Okay, now this is where things get really cool. With discharge printing, you actually start with a piece of fabric that's already been dyed a solid, usually dark color. Then you print a design onto it using a special chemical paste that literally destroys or removes that dye. So the key here is you're not adding color, you're taking it away. It's kind of like drawing with an eraser on a page you've already colored in. And this is a perfect example of that. You might look at this and assume that someone printed white ink onto black fabric, but it's actually the complete opposite. This fabric started out as solid black, and then a chemical paste was applied in this precise pattern to remove the black dye, revealing the natural, lighter color of the fiber underneath. It's a really clever, subtractive way to create a design. And our third style, resist printing, works by protecting the fabric. The best way to think about this is tie-dye. You start with a white shirt, you use rubber bands to block off certain areas, right? Then you dunk it in dye. The dye colors everything except the parts that were protected. Well, it's the same principle here, but instead of rubber bands, a substance like wax or even clay is printed in a pattern to resist the dye. And this is what that can look like. For every one of these fabrics, those beautiful light-colored patterns exist not because someone added color, but because the original fabric was shielded from it. Famous techniques like batik, which uses wax as the resist, are perfect examples of this. The final pattern is basically a ghost of what was protected from the dye. Okay, so now you know the how and the what. Let's get practical. How can you actually tell which style was used on the clothes in your closet or the fabrics in your home? It's time to turn you into a print detective. Your biggest clue for a direct print is almost always on the reverse side. So just flip the fabric over. Does the pattern look faded or a lot lighter on the back than it does on the front? That is your telltale sign. It means the ink was just applied to the surface and didn't soak all the way through the fibers. Now, for a discharge print, the first thing to check is that the background color is solid and just as dark on both sides. But here's the real pro tip. Get in there and look really closely at the back of the printed part of the design. A lot of the time, you'll see a faint, kind of hazy trace of the original background color where the chemical didn't get it 100% clean. That's your smoking gun. Finally, figuring out a resist print often just comes down to its unique look and feel. As our source material points out, these are usually craft-based techniques, not something you do on a massive production line. So if a pattern has that organic, handmade vibe of tie-dye, or those characteristic fine, crackled lines you see in batik, you can be pretty darn sure you're looking at a resist print. So we've gone on this whole journey, right? From ancient wooden blocks to modern-day chemistry, and we've even learned how to decode the patterns all around us. So let's just take a second to bring it all together and think about the final story that the fabric has to tell. You know, whether a pattern is born from the slow, patient rhythm of a hand-carved block or the precise chemical reactions in a huge factory, every single one of them is the final chapter of a story. It's a story that weaves together art and science and literally centuries of human ingenuity. And that really leaves us with one last question to chew on. In this world of fast fashion, where we buy and toss things so quickly, does understanding the skill, the history, and the sheer ingenuity behind a simple pattern, does that change how we see and value our clothes? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.